Yeah, so
It's an
welcome to the
honor.
stream. But yeah, too long, and I was always just like, I need to mix it out of all of the overly dominant, which is like common in our field, but becoming less so, which I'm very excited about, especially in like art director and those sort of roles, which is
Yeah,
exciting to
totally.
see. And just, I don't know, I think get new perspectives and stuff. So, yeah, welcome. And then I think if you want to do a little intro about yourself, just like who you are, and then we can get into other stuff.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm Julie Craft. You can find me at Craftmatic with an extra K at Twitter and Instagram. I'm on TikTok now too, whatever.
Ooh.
Um, well, yeah, we'll see. I'll talk about that later. So yeah, I don't know, I've been doing animation forever. I like graduated from a trade school here in Michigan. I'm in Detroit, called Specs Howard. It was like a broadcasting school, basically. Like they had editing and like news studio stuff, not much, but I did learn like Avid editing. That was like the first of that I learned. And that was in 1999. And
Mm.
also my high school had a TV and radio station. So
Oh, cool.
like I quickly in high school was like, oh yeah, I love this stuff, and I was like, best in the class, whatever. Of course, right? I mean, I was totally like super nerd in high school, like
Mm.
not a lot of friends, but once I like had that TV radio crew, that was like where I started to flourish. I'm like, these are my people. It was like totally like Freaks and Geeks, like all the misfits, like
Mm.
basically were in the TV and radio
I think
joint.
Freaks and Geeks is also Detroit, right? Like that's where that show is.
Oh, is it?
I think
Oh
so.
yeah, I think it does. Yeah, it does.
So
Whether or not it was
officially.
all filmed here, but it is supposed to take place here. Yeah.
um
hmm
so cool. Yeah, so would
Yeah.
you
So I've
say
been
that
doing this
like
forever.
your intro to it was more like physical media, like kind of like hands-on like video, audio would be what
Yeah,
like got you
absolutely.
into the interest? When did it kind of switch over? Like when did you decide
Yeah.
like motion graphics 3D was like the place to go for like your creativity?
Yeah, so that Specs Howard thing was 1999. Then right after that, got my first job as a production coordinator at Comcast, which is like a local cable company, and they did like commercials, like in their in-house department.
Mm.
So I was, yeah, production coordinator, literally just giving the producers their projects, and I was doing a little bit of editing. But a freelancer came in one day, and that was the first time I heard that. Oh, freelance is a
Mm.
thing, and they were using After Effects, and I was like, oh my god! And they're using like the lightning effect, the
Yep.
lightning, advanced lightning or whatever. And I was like, that's cool. I want to learn that. So I just started learning it on my own, and like kind of like I would say 2 or 3 years from that point, they moved me into a full time like graphics position.
Oh wow.
Um, so I totally just learned like all my, even though I did have some formal education of editing and nonlinear editing, all my design and animation stuff is all self taught.
So if
You
so
know,
into After Effects, like did that get you into the whole suite of like Premiere, like Illustrator, or was it like solely
yeah. I
just
mean,
After Effects?
well, I was still like using Avid for video editing at the
Mm.
time because Premiere wasn't the standard,
Yeah.
and it's like Final Cut then. Yeah, I totally was Avid, Final Cut than Premiere. And I grew up with Andrew Kramer, who did
Right.
Copilot and
Okay.
Grayscale
Yeah.
Gorilla. Like that's why I started. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what year I started using Cinema, but I was like right at the beginning of Nick Campbell's Grayscale Gorilla stuff. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I
so
think that that's a very
totally grew
common
up there.
thread of a lot of people that are like, well, I knew something, and then like it was just easier to like learn it on my own online, which is just crazy. That like I think it was the perfect time for that. Of like it was free, which was hard to find. Like that was kind of the era of like $500 like
Yeah.
big classes that you had to buy, and I was like, oh well,
hmm
not for me.
Yeah. And it was so easy to pirate the software. The
Right.
classes were always more expensive than the
Right.
software.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
hard to
like, I don't
pirate
want,
the classes.
yeah, I don't
Um,
want to take a class. And I was
yeah.
like young then, so I would just throw countless hours at stuff, right? Like totally inefficient. Just learn everything. Just don't sleep. Just be ridiculous. I
Yeah.
didn't care. Whatever. Time was cheap then, right?
Right. And it was like
It's not anymore. Yeah.
results at the end. Like, you
Yeah.
spent like 6 hours a day or so, and you got a
hmm
result that you could like then, I don't know, I was so excited to show it to people.
Yeah. Like
And
right
just be like,
away.
look at this
Totally.
thing that I made, but I also just kind of copied exactly from a tutorial. um,
Yeah, but it wasn't like the social media wasn't like as widespread now, so people didn't know. You just copied it from a tutorial.
yeah, that was something. Like, there was no place to share it. It was like purely personal and just like, huh, cool, I made it. It will live on my desktop and no one will really ever see it. But it was like learning how to do stuff. So yeah, so that
Yeah.
means that like, hey, there's Billy. He's in the chat. It says, "Hey,
Oh, nice.
friends."
I'm glad someone's watching.
um, so that's cool. That like that's I think a pretty quick from like not knowing anything to being like in a position like within 2 to 3 years is pretty
I know.
fast.
I was just being a maniac. I mean, most of us are overachievers. I was definitely an
Right.
overachiever then, and I am now.
Um, cool. So with like kind of hearing of the freelance thing, was that like an immediate like interest of like not having the 9 to 5, not being locked down at a place? Like, um, when did that kind of itch to like do something with that? After seeing like that kind of role really come in.
I guess that planted the seed,
Mm,
for later in life because I was full time for a long time. I didn't end up going freelance until 2014. So
okay.
yeah, we're talking like from 2001 is when I was really doing graphics, and then to 2014, talking 13 years, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it took a while. But I was, I guess like freelancing wasn't as well known and like the term MoGraph or, as a career was barely even established yet.
Mm,
Right. So I can't say, oh, I'm an animation MoGraph freelancer. Like people are like, what is that? I don't know what that is. Are you an editor? No,
yeah.
well, yeah, but more, you know what I mean? That was the
Right.
era of, oh, editing in an edit suite with producer and creative director breathing down your neck and
Hmm.
all that crap.
And I think
So yeah,
animation like came along with like a lot of people attach it to character animation or like Disney
totally.
animation, and it's like, well,
Yes, we
no,
still do, but yeah.
yeah, it's like other stuff. It's like anything that moves, and people will be like, okay, but yeah, MoGraph is just synonymous with like, oh yeah, everyone kind of knows now, but back then I would assume
Hmm.
was less known. So did you stay kind of at Comcast like after you got that role, or
I'm
like where'd
trying
you
to figure
kind of
out
like bounce
what
around?
was my next job. Trying to remember. Let's see here. What did I do? I I was there for like 5 years, I think, from after that, or not after that. Well, 5 years total, and then I went to like some local ad agencies, and then in like a smaller studio that actually two of the people that worked at Comcast with me started later on. I was with them for a while. Then from there, I went to like a place called Vector Form. They're like interactive. Um, it's where you go to their website. You don't know what they do, but they do like a lot of like interactive, and now they're working a lot with like Unreal Engine and Unity
Mm,
building experiences for clients to like train employees and stuff. Yeah, so it was interesting. But I did get to work on like my first like game, like an iOS game. There's an
mm,
iOS like kind of a tower defense style game that they made.
okay.
Like they were pushing games when I first got there. They kind of stopped doing that, but so that was cool. So then I was like that was the first time I would say I was like really getting into like the visual effects side of animation.
Mm,
Like before that, it was all like design, text, advertising, supers on car commercials,
right.
blah blah blah, right? Um, and like a lot of video transitions with just some
Hmm.
text, like simple stuff, but very design focused. But then yeah, VFX kind of like came into my mind there, and there was an artist there, John Einsland, that was very visual effects like focused, and like I just kind of, like really it was like, oh, this is fun. This is weird stuff,
Hmm.
whatever. So I learned a ton there for like 3 years or something. I was there, but by that time I'd realized like everywhere I work like isn't quite right for me.
Right.
I'm like, I don't think I'm ever gonna find something that's right for me, full time. And
Hmm.
and it's fine if like there's plenty of staff artists that are great and they like having um, like a very consistent team around them
Right.
and so forth. And they're not so concerned about their personal brand as they are. They're fine, being like I'm part of this company or this
Hmm.
group. But I realized like I was just I was way more of an individual and I wanted people to like know me as an individual artist more.
Mm,
Um, I was pretty like shy at the time. I would say like way more introverted than I am now. So I was like, I want to like go freelance, and then I was like, I don't know. And I told my wife, and she's like, yeah, you can do it. Like, fine, just do it. Like plan 6 months ahead. So I planned a date 6 months ahead, made sure I had like a decent savings cushion, blah blah blah, and jumped. And I already like before I started actually officially freelancing, I reached out to all my previous employers saying like, hey, I'm going to be going freelance. Keep me in mind starting on this date. I'll be out for hire. And I already had like 3 weeks of bookings lined up
oh wow.
before I got yeah, you know, so because I thought I'd hop, freelance, and I'd like work on my demo reel the first couple of days or
Right.
first week or something, right? No, I just worked for weeks and didn't make a demo reel for like 2 months, right?
Yeah, I think that that's kind of a lot of people's fear of like jumping from like kind of stable into freelance is like it sounds great, but also the like unknown is really scary. At least like for me, that was like, okay, this is when
Yeah.
I'll do it. But then it's like you know that you know a lot of people and that you'll probably get booked, but like you immediately start thinking of like, well, that's one day I ate into my runway. That's another day gone that I'm
Hmm.
paying myself. So that's nice to kind of have that stuff lined up and kind of so that's like a lot of work
Yeah,
still
that's cool.
even in like local, which I think like a lot of people for some reason think like I can't freelance. I'm not in X, Y, and Z big hub where it seems like a lot of stuff is going on, which I think
Right.
is like yeah, even more so now, like a lot of remote stuff very much so opens up the borders of where that is. But even back then being able to like, you know, get booked already going freelance with like local places, I think is like a lot of hope for a lot of people that kind of have that fear. So going
Yeah.
freelance, do you think that right away did you feel like the ease of like being more of an individual and like kind of being
Oh
like a
yeah.
hired gun, like kind of like really righted a lot of those things that were like feeling not correct?
Yeah, no, like right away. And I always say like I met more people in my first year of freelancing than I did like the previous 10 years working at studios
Mm,
and agencies, you know? It was just like I was and we were working, that's when we worked all like in house at different
right.
places. So I would go to different places and it was cool because I was like, this special freelance person
Yeah.
or whatever. And it was funny, everyone would always tell me like their gossip
Mm,
because I was like a neutral party. So I'd go to every
right.
studio and like get all the gossip, which was hilarious.
Accidentally
Um,
became like the therapist for the entire studio.
I know it's so funny. So that would happen, but yeah, mainly I made all these connections, and I was like, oh, this is great. But pretty quickly, like I realized, like, oh, I do miss having freelancer or like my coworkers around me. I'm working from
Hmm.
home, whatever. So that's when I started MoGraph Mondays, and
Mm.
that was like super fun.
And for
Yeah, but
people that don't know what MoGraph Mondays are,
yeah,
like
sure.
maybe we can dig into that because I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just such a cool concept. If you want to like expand upon it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so what was I saying right now? Oh yeah, so Morgraph Monday. So it's at first I like didn't have a name, and I was like, what is this? I don't know, some meetup group. I basically had like an email a list of
Mm,
people, and like I was just kind of I basically everywhere I freelanced, I would go and like talk to them, be like, hey, if I had like this meetup thing, or would you want to do this? And people were like, yeah, 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 I totally do it. So it was just like five of us at a coffee shop, and I would email them out, and it was kind of inconsistent, and just like whatever. So then I was like, oh, I really like this. People are really gravitating to it, and I thought, well, I think I need to like brand this, right? So I made a logo. I decided on doing it on Mondays because I felt like a Monday is the day when people typically don't have as many deliverables to get out
hmm.
and stuff. Like, and most people don't have commitments on Mondays, and usually don't, are less likely to have to work Mondays than opposed to like a Wednesday or Friday. So that's why I did that, and it worked. Yeah, it worked with the branding, MoGraph Mondays, right? It's two M's, like the logo is really simple. So that was cool. Yeah, and then I don't know, like we were meeting at a local tea shop. I don't know, like when. I think at some point Vector Form moved offices, and then they're like, "Hey, we could host your event, right?"
Mm,
And so I started having it at the Vector Form office, place I used to work, and it was a cool office, and it was like, it gave like I don't know, kind of more cred to my event because people would come like, "Oh, what's this cool place?" Even though like I wasn't officially associated with it, it was like, "Oh, we have
right.
this space." And then I started, opening up to like other studios in the area. We basically had it at like every different studio in the area, and it would repeat sometimes, and the community was growing. And then Scott Warniak, who runs Lunar North, him and Marcus Mullins, it's another local studio here. He would have this MoGraph barbecue every summer,
Mm,
and like he had been doing that for a while before MoGraph Mondays, and then after MoGraph Mondays, like his barbecue attendance was like skyrocketing, and like the community, like in like probably like 3-ish years, really like ramped up, like got way bigger. And I think that was partially due to like people at the local schools, College for Creative Studies, kind of being like, oh, motion graphics is a thing, like, and then getting connected to us and whatever, like the people who ran the meetup groups and whatever, like, people were just getting into it more, and it was becoming like a career destination. Like, oh, I'm going to be an
mm,
animator, I'm going to be a motion designer, right? So yeah, that became a thing, and we did MoGraph Mondays like every month, once a month, yeah, always once a month. on the last Monday of the month, and we did it consistently for 5 years.
Wow.
At my house a couple times in this room behind me, and um, like it just became a big thing. Obviously, we paused for COVID,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and we've had it a couple times since COVID, and I think this month we're gonna like try to start up again permanently, hopefully. So
Mm.
yeah, and it's just become a thing. People know about it, and it was funny. Like different teachers at the college for creative studies would be like, "Oh, our students are like talking about this thing, MoGraph Mondays. Like, what is this? Like, people go there? Like it was turning into this like secret knowledge.
Right.
They're like, what is this? Like can students go to that? I don't even know. Like, it was fun that this mystique like went out
Hmm.
further, and I was like, wow. I didn't think people
It's
would
like
care
all
about
word
this.
of mouth at some point,
So
just building it.
yeah, and that was really cool. And now and that was happening locally, and then kind of that's a similar way that like Boxford is becoming a thing people know
Mm.
about out there. They don't even know exactly who's in it; they just know it's a thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'm in it. So yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, and then Boxford kind of after like I think I don't know what year. I'm so bad with chronological like
Right.
dates. Like I
I
don't know
think,
when things happen.
yeah.
Probably around was it what year is it? 2022, 1918. I think it's like 2017 is when box sport really started, if I
Mm.
recall correctly. I could be totally wrong. Maybe Billy, if you're out there, help me.
Get on the
uh,
interwebs and
yeah. I'm on the chat here. So what was I talking about? Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll transition into Boxford.
yeah.
So I had been freelancing at home for like 5 or so years. I was like, okay, I'm tired of being at home. Maybe I could do something else. I don't know. Maybe I can get an office space somewhere. It was something
Mm.
floating around in my mind. So there's another local studio here, Gunner. Most people have heard of Gunner. That's like the most famous studio here in Detroit now. And they had asked Billy, like, hey, because Billy and several other friends, people that have been coming to MoGraph Mondays consistently, that I consider like the core group, like they almost all went freelance around the same time. So they're asking, the Gunner people are asking Billy, hey, would you want to rent a desk here at Gunner since you're freelance?
Mm.
I said, yeah. And then he was like telling us, and we're like, we'd all love to do that. And then it came to the point where I was like, well, let me see how much their rent is. This was at a little like a Catholic schoolhouse. It was
Oh,
formerly a Catholic
right.
schoolhouse, so there was lockers in the
Hmm.
hallways and everything. And I just found out, like, I asked Gunner, like, how much is your rent for your room? And they told me. I was like, oh, if we split that up between like 8 people, we could handle that. And we got a room like half their size. We got the room directly below Gunner. So when they would jump around and party, we'd be like, what is going on up there? Are they bowling? What is happening? So yeah, we got a room there, and there's like 8 of us in like an 800 square foot room, which sounds pretty small, but it wasn't too bad. It was pretty magical, and the rest is history. And now we have a new location that's like 3 times the size, and we're also like right next to Gunner and Hobbs, their sister studio, and we have a little creative like a courtyard and kind of a little creative campus, and it's super rad. It's like really fun our community we have here. So
So with
yeah.
Boxsport starting with a lot of you all as freelancers and not as a like studio per se, like how did that kind of development happen where it's like some people go on projects together under the name, or like I think Boxford has also been spread around as like you guys make shorts sometimes, and like I think those get spread around a lot, and it's like who made this, and it's like Boxford. It's like, is it a studio? Is it multiple people that like the studio changes like kind of internally who they're like making teamed up? So kind of I'm always curious about that because it seems like very organic, but also like very not the norm of like other places.
Yeah, it's definitely very organic, and yeah, people have a tendency to not understand, like especially I don't know. I like to say that the more old school people here locally, they're like, "What is Boxer? I don't understand. Like, how do I bid this? Like, I don't know." So yeah, when we started, we thought, well, maybe this will turn into a studio, whatever. We weren't really concerned about what it became. We just knew, like, well, right now we're all working. Wouldn't it be nice to at least work next to each other? Sometimes get each other's opinions on different projects. And then hopefully, like, 2 or 3 of us can pair up at a time, work on things, whatever. Um, and also when Box started, I was like very ambitious. I'm like, let's put out one short a month, and like different, like maybe teams of 2 or 3, not like everyone working on it, like because then we could cycle it around. And we did that for a bit, and that was nice. Somehow that kind of tapered off, and I think it definitely chilled out, obviously, during when COVID happened. But we still want to do that stuff. But yeah, it did start as kind of just, it was nice to have a brand to put it all under, like as, oh, this is a box for sure. Like that was great. Um, yeah, and I had then that, so that was a plan. And then we actually have like bid a couple projects as a studio, but like that never worked out yet. It's like the pricing, I don't know, for some reason it just never works out. It's actually never been like, oh, we'll make more money on this than we would as just individual freelancers. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, like they don't go for it. So that's like in our minds, but that's not as important. It's kind of becoming, yeah, and I'm always like wondering, what do I do with my career next? Like, do I need to make box for the studio, whatever, like that's always out there nebulously. And we always say like, well, one big project, if it happened where people wanted to book us as a team, like then we would just be a studio.
Mm.
Like there's very little barrier now between individual or studio. Like there's many like studios that are just two people
Yeah.
under a brand name now. And
Hmm.
like, so what's nice is like for us to switch to that would be like not a big deal. Like, yeah, just the little
Hmm.
thing as a studio. It's super easy. We're already in the same room. We already like know each other. We already kind of like know each other how we work. I know the issue can be like who's the leader, right?
Right.
So like whenever we've done a short or whatever, like we've always had like each person, people have designated roles, different directors per short or whatever. And when we did the titles for Halfers in 2019, we had like three different sections, each directed by like a different person. So that was just another way to spread the
Hmm.
leadership around. And like naturally, it's like different people, kind of like Billy and I were just kind of naturally the leaders, at the beginning there, and it just kind of flows around, depending on what everyone wants to contribute. Because we have like people that are full time at Boxford, and then people that are like floaters, we call them. They come in and out with like laptops and whatever. So it's like a co-working space in that sense. So we're trying to get more people in there. So we kind of need to like maybe advertise a little bit. But yeah, I would say what it is now is just it's a co-working space with a core group of people that we like being around each other and being friends. And sure, we'd love to work together on client projects, if that works for
Hmm.
us. But we're all like very individual. We're all like very like, I don't know. We're very concerned about our own well-being, each of us. So
Right.
like very few of us like really want to start a formal studio. Like that's like a level of things that like it just doesn't appeal to us as
Right.
more. It doesn't
It sort of
feel
can kind of make it
meaningful.
more political. I don't know, just like a lot more
Yeah.
of the businessy things that is nice as a freelancer that you never really have to deal with. You're just like,
Yeah.
you come
Yeah.
in and they have the structure and then you get to just do your
Mhm.
thing and leave. And then, yeah, forming a studio brings a lot of that in house
Yeah.
and makes, I don't know, it less friendly in some
Totally.
case, or could. Um,
They can. Yeah. So
but
I'm
then,
always admiring the studios that are killing it because I'm like, wow, you
right.
figured out the magic. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of stuff I don't ever want to deal with
Yeah.
on that side. And then, so kind of the people that come in and out, it's like just a rent base, like you rent kind of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
spot sort of thing?
They pay rent. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, that's
Pretty
cool.
simple. Pretty loose.
Yeah.
I mean, like people, if they just want to come in one day here and there, I'm like, oh, here's our a la carte per day. And
Mm.
then if you do want to come in most of the month, it's cheaper to just pay like the floater fee. Whatever. It's very minimal. I do like I want to like put our website doesn't like advertise us as a co-working space or whatever, but I'd like to put that as a section on our site, like, hey, our space. If you want to
Hmm.
be an artist in residence at Boxford, just to make it feel like more of a thing.
Hmm.
People would be like, oh, that sounds like I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything is like how you present it, right? Everything is like spin, whatever. How do we make it seem more like an upscale, like New York artist collective? Well, I guess
Right.
we have to like, position it that way, right?
Hmm.
But but I'm glad Detroit's getting notoriety because now it's like people don't think of Detroit as like just a nothing, or
Right.
just like a tiny market. It's like, oh no, it's like small but like special. Like people
Yeah.
are recognizing the Detroit community and everything.
And I think
Definitely
like
thanks to Gunner for really
a lot of that with social media has kind of really
Mhm.
blurred the lines. Like, I think because you'll just see something cool and it like, you're like, oh wow, like this place can become very well known for just making really cool stuff, and then it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. I mean, it might be a surprise when you're like, where is this out of? And it's like, you know, somewhere that isn't necessarily well known as like a big hub, but I think that it's at least getting a lot of different perspectives, like more things outside of even just the US, like more things in like Spain or different areas where you get just a completely cool, I don't know, just like they bring their own influences from where they are, and it gets out of kind of the stuffiness, which I feel like kind of can come with our industry. It gets very same at some point, or someone does something cool, then it influences what cool is for a little bit. Um, but
Yeah.
I think that's another thing with the shorts that Boxford has put out, because you kind of shuffle who was doing what or who gets to direct. Like the style even of them can vary drastically from one to the other. I think the first one I saw was The Lock. And I was like, oh, cool. It's like, that style of short. And then the next one came out and I was like, oh, that is very different
Yeah.
from like the other one. So I think do you think that helps you as like kind of your desire to work around people, like people with different styles and different opinions, and like inspiration can help even evolve how you work or like what you put into your work?
Oh yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, so I feel like at Box for It, we will present something as like, here's a Box for It short from these two people, and then it's like we definitely want to show like, these are our individual styles, because every freelancer is like, so
Mm-hmm.
it helps even amplify our own personal brands, which is cool, having an umbrella. But shoot, what was the question you just asked me?
Oh, just
I
like
was
working
launching into
around the
something.
people with the different
Oh yeah, yeah,
styles
yeah.
and like,
Sorry, no, it's. I mean, it's made me like way like yeah, it's made me a better artist in a million different ways. It's so helpful, like because especially now that many people work from home without as much connection. It's like you'll just be just chiseling away at a project or at a shot and like looking at it over and over. And sometimes you just need someone to like who hasn't looked at it at all to give you a fresh perspective. And
mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, look at this. What do you think of this? Or someone just comes by and is like, well, it looks super sweet. And you're like, it does? Does it? Like, I've been looking at it for hours. I don't think it looks like
Right.
anything now. And then they're like, no, no. It's like they'll what's the coolest is they when they point out something like a different part of it. Like say you've been focused like, oh, the cool part's this part, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
cool part. And then like, oh, look at this here. Like I'm like, oh, like that's interesting that that's where your eyes gravitated to. Because
Mm.
I wasn't even focusing on like that part of the composition or whatever. So that's totally interesting. It's like, well, I'm like maybe, and then it's like, well, maybe I'm like going the wrong way with this, or maybe this shot is done, but I should focus a little bit on that part of it, or yeah, it just can be a nice shift. You get
Mm-hmm.
the choice. You're the one in charge of your own art.
Right.
It's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So yeah, but like we know each other well. Like we're all friends, so it's like these aren't just YouTube comments, right? These are like
Yeah.
people I
It's
trust coming in here
valued.
giving very like yeah critique, and it's like yeah these are people that know what they're talking about.
I think that
And so
that's
that's what's crazy,
something
the trust. Yeah.
that like sort of you get a lot in college. At least I feel like that's where like I felt that the most, of like people with different perspectives almost, but like valued opinion. And then you kind of, yeah, do lose that a bit even in person at studios. Like, I don't know, it can seem like people that aren't, I don't know, not as valued, but like are sort of with different agendas looking at stuff that you're working on. But when it's just like a peer to peer artist, you kind of like get a little bit, and in person feedback is much easier to receive than like sending it out online to someone and getting like typed back feedback.
Yeah.
I have found is a little bit better whenever receiving feedback. I am curious though, kind of back to like the freelance aspect of it, like how have you found kind of getting new like clientele or people that you work with? Has it like sort of, I feel like a lot of people are always curious about that, of like how do you get to network with new people outside of like the local places around? Is it like email? Is it like art you put out? I'm always curious how different people are kind of expanding their Rolodex of different studios.
Well, what's cool is so in our locally we've had our meetup groups more off
Mm-hmm.
Mondays. Me being in charge of that, like okay, everyone knows who I am now, right?
Right.
So that got me super connected locally, like really fast. And then now, it's like us, Boxford, and Gunner and Hobbs like hang out a lot. And like Gunner and Hobbs will have various freelancers from all over the world come to town for a week or a month,
Mm.
and like we all hang out, and we're all part of the neighborhood, right? So we get super connected there. And then, I mean, all of us at Boxford, we love going to events like Blend and Dash Bash, and I go to like all the events. Like I went to Half Res, and then a week later I went to Camp Mograph this year.
Mm.
I mean, I'm very much an in-person networker in that sense, but to the point where like now I'm like, oh, I'm just hanging out with my friends. Like I'm
Yeah.
not even, but it's just, you're fresh in people's minds,
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple like Slack channels and Discord things that I belong to. I don't have time to talk online as much, and that's like there's really wonderful Slack communities online,
Mm-hmm.
like Prograph Slack and everything that are fantastic, and those are really great for especially people in smaller markets that don't have much community, like in South Dakota. There's like a couple of people in South Dakota. Bryson Carson is one of them. He was at camp, and like there's only like two or three of them. So I'm glad they come to events and they connect online. They can't have a MoGraph Mondays when there's only like two people, right?
Right. And then
So that's nice. Yeah.
kind of
But,
you said that Mograph Mondays was hosted by different studios, so I think that that was like
yeah.
beneficial for them as well because they're just it's an easy net. Like they've now collected a bunch of people that could possibly
Mhm.
be like hired at any point. So kind of like a two-way street for them as well to like get all of those people in one area to like get to know them and stuff. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Totally.
And then kind of in your, as you said, like you're very interested in like what you work on, and that sort of stuff. Has that like evolved over the years of like your interests? Like was there a
Yeah.
goal project that you had in the beginning that like has totally shifted, or you've done it and you're like, actually I really want to like go over here? Like you went from After Effects into like Cinema 4D. Like have you found a groove that like you really like in out in through the fastness that is MoGraph kind of?
Yeah. I've struggled a lot with because I feel like I don't I don't necessarily present like on my Instagram and stuff. I don't present as an artist with a very specific aesthetic. And I'm like, oh, do I need to get more niche? Whatever,
Mm.
right? But and I've always like struggled with having enough time and doing personal projects. That's one place where Billy has really excelled. He's always consistently done personal work, and my personal work is very often on. But I yeah, I would say like for a while I was just like, trying to be trying to for a while I was just trying like to get studios, to get out of just the local scene, to get out of
Mm.
like just the auto show and car stuff here in Detroit. So that was my goal for a while. It's like, oh, I'm kind of tired of doing the auto show. Like, did a couple of years. Like, that was cool, but it's like not what I want. It's fine work, but it's not what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted. So for a while, I was just like, okay, I want out of here, whatever. And now, like, I am to the point where it's like, oh man, like new studios come by all the time, are hearing my name, like people are, it's out there, right? So I'm to the point where I'm very fortunate. Like, work just comes to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nice. But I'm also realizing that like I'm not sure what I want to do. Like, I don't want to start a studio, but like, I would be interested in, I don't know, maybe being like in a director role or a lead role because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, I get hired as an animator, and sometimes I just fall into a bit of a technical lead and sometimes even a creative like lead of just a couple of people on a project, whether it's intentional or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, do I need to like, say like, oh, I'm a freelance director and like bill more, like that's a thing I'm
Right.
trying to figure out right now. And I know most people do that like by just they create a studio and then they're the creative director, right?
Yeah.
Well, once again, I don't want that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine working under a creative director, but I can definitely lead a smaller team. And also, I still want to work on shots and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind being a director on projects and lead by example. Maybe do a shot or two myself and
Mm-hmm.
help lead other artists. So I'm thinking about that, and then I really like want to work on film and TV titles because I have a lot of friends that are doing it. And I'm like, it just hasn't happened for me yet. I know it will, but so there's definitely that. So like that's stuff I'm thinking about, and
Mm-hmm.
that's people are saying, well, you got to make like personal projects that kind of look like film titles, and so people know you do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Okay, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of in that realm now where I'm trying to like figure out what's my own aesthetic and what are some like things I can make that are fun to make that aren't
Right.
too much of a pain because if a personal project's not fun, like you're never gonna finish
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely kind of evolving in that sense, trying to figure out where I fit in and how Boxford can be. It's a collection of freelancers, but can it be like a little more like a studio? Can we get
Mm-hmm.
a couple clients maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff that's in flux. But I also want to have a life and like do my hobbies and stuff. So,
That
you
is
know,
always the balance of
it's a
like
struggle.
um kind of as you go along. I feel like in the beginning I was like very head down or like had yeah,
Mhm.
kind of like you said, like unlimited time to do like personal
Right.
project after work was like a no brainer. It was like absolutely.
Yeah.
And then kind of as it goes on, now kind of the
There's
work
so
life
much to learn,
balance.
right? There's
Yeah.
so much I didn't know. It's kind of a pain knowing a ton because I'm like, oh, I can't just learn stuff. I gotta like do the hard part of like subconsciously generating ideas. Like that's harder. Like creating like style frames from scratch and stuff, that's harder than learning,
Right.
Houdini. So
and and just the
yeah.
plethora of new always like there's new software, there's new
Yeah.
things all the time to learn alongside, yeah, just doing the stuff that's like not the learning or not the exploring, um, can get overwhelming, at least for me, I found.
Oh, it's
um,
super overwhelming. Just everything's out there. I mean, you don't need to learn everything,
yeah.
It's nice to be like, you know what, I don't need to learn that. And for me, like I basically feel like I have all the technical skills I need to do, I would say, the dream projects I want to do. There's always
Hmm.
things I can get better at, right? But before when you start out learning, it's like, oh, I learned this. Oh my gosh, like you level up really big
Hmm.
chunks. And now it's like I'm up here and I'm like, I just like learn new things very gradually. It's way more about like a granular increase of like, like taste and nuance or whatever, it's just like a
Right.
much
The less
slower.
tangible things, the the
Yeah,
things that are a lot slower and less easy to point to that you've learned,
absolutely.
versus the
And the
buttons that
things
you
that you
learned.
don't see, yeah, the things you don't see on the reel or whatever, it's like,
Hmm.
the ability to like, you know, plan out shots and also like get them rendered in time and like communicate to the client, issues or whatever, like all these
Right.
untangible things, So that's a
Hmm.
whole other thing. 'Cause I'm like, how do I even, it's hard to promote the other stuff you can do. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally be a lead and stuff. Do people know that? I don't know. You can't tell
Yeah,
from my reel or my website. They don't know what I want to do. So
I
I'm
do
trying to
think
figure out
that's
how I position myself at this point. Yeah.
that is like a big deal that kind of I've heard at least lamented from studios and stuff of like they get a reel and they're like, very cool shot. No clue what part of the shot that person was
Mhm.
doing. Like
Yeah,
it is a
that's a
great
problem.
shot. And so like kind of I've started on my website at least like time marking and being like, this is exactly the extent of like what I did to get this like shot done. Like, is it all aspects, which is like great to have. Like, I try to have as much of that as possible, which is like sometimes hard to do at studios when it gets taken away from you and you're like, I could have comped it, but I guess someone else gets to comp it, sort of thing. Um, but yeah, just being able to kind of let them know the ability range and like being able to say that you did everything is always great. But I think back to kind of the directing stuff, I find that a lot of people have like kind of don't want to give up being on the box, but also want to still be able to like flex the muscle of like organizing. Like there's things that become beyond like you on like in your single shot where it's like a vision that just more people need to work on at a single time to get it done and be at that scale. So I think that like art director role, I feel like has always kind of been an influx thing that I've seen at different studios where it's like in tandem with creative director, lots of input. Obviously not the creative director who has like kind of final say on stuff, but also on the box, like still getting to like set stuff up at least, or like, be the next chain of command. So I think that, it's always a struggle for a lot of freelance specific people I've seen because like, yeah, you can technically be any position at any time and you float between like the different positions. Like you can go all the way back to just I'm an animator on this job, or I'm a senior animator, or yeah, I'm a TD, or I'm the art director. Like it does kind of get confusing in your own head versus being like a staff somewhere where it's like expected and that's what you do every day. Sort
Hmm.
of struggle.
And I don't mind the fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
I can deal with many moving parts, and as a freelancer, I'm used to stretching and doing different things all the time. But I'm like, how do I like position myself as that? Because if like I go into a project where like I know I'm gonna be doing more than just animating, my assigned stuff. Like I'm gonna end up doing like a lot more. Then it's like, well, I need to say like, hey, like I don't know, like, are you hiring me as an animator or are you hiring me as like a potential lead,
Mm-hmm.
or art director, like because that could be a thing. So it's hard. I'm not sure to do it as a freelancer because I once again don't want a full time job right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe ever. So I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah,
But
I think that it's also maybe even a cliche has become where it's like I don't know, the freelancer that's just like, wow, everyone's now just a self-labeled director out of nowhere. It's just
yeah.
like become a thing where it's like, yeah, technically, yeah, you can if you want to, but if you're not getting hired, I don't know, it seems silly to just. But who knows? Maybe that's the move. Just start calling yourself that, and then that's what you are after a
Yeah.
while. Could
It's a
work for
weird
some
weird
people.
realm. I've been talking to a lot of people about this, so this is something I'm trying to figure out.
I think, like you said,
You know,
the making a reel or making a website for the work you want to get, like you said, like main titles or something, is like a very
mhm,
common thing that I think is great advice for people. Like, if you don't like doing a certain type of thing, but it's like in your portfolio because you just happen to keep doing it, like it's what you're gonna keep doing.
I
People
know
are
you
just
have to
gonna
like
keep going.
break it. You have to break the cycle.
Right. I think that's where
It's hard.
the personal projects like come in. Just like if you don't want to show it, then your website's bare, and you're like, ah, okay. So it's like I guess I have to do a personal project to show the things you do want to do, and it's just like the tug of war there. But then
Hmm.
the light at the end of the tunnel is if you start doing that work, you get to put that, and then it snowballs into doing that work more, which is just a funny part of the industry and how studios kind of work. Um,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's it's hard because you also like, oh, you don't want to have to like work extra hours,
right.
right? I'm already doing this client work. So for me, like I found out, like, I mean, I almost never do personal work unless it's just I'm not doing client work at that
Mm,
time. So I either purposefully take off some days or a week from client work, which is hard to say no to money.
yep.
Because when you're freelancer, you know exactly how much your time is
right.
worth. I'm like, well, I'm literally saying no to this much money per day. Like that's
Personal projects
very,
cost money. You're
yeah,
like, wow,
it's
this
very
is an
painful to
expensive
like,
little short I'm making.
I know if you, so that is very tough psychologically. Um, and I meant to mention this earlier, but I would say, like, my opinion, the hardest part about being a freelancer is all psychological
Mm,
barriers. I mean, most artists that are even considering going freelance, most of them have totally have the skills. Like, definitely have the technical skills, and most likely have the social and pitching skills to like be freelance. That's fine. But it's more about like the uncertainty of like, oh my god, am I ever going to work again? You know, if no one books me for a week, and also being able to like have a week between projects, or even have uncertain unbooked time, and then start doing a personal project and just kind of hope, have faith that you're going to get work.
mm-hmm.
But like I can handle that now after years. Like now I can deal with it. Like if I don't get booked, it's always a joke. Like in my house, like, oh, I'm not booked for a day. Like I guess my career's over. It's just like no
yeah.
one's gonna ever book me, and then three people come in. Like you eventually get past those psychological hurdles, and you can kind of do it. So it's another psychological hurdle to say like, okay, I need to develop my. I mean, you can phrase it as to develop my business and to improve my, myself. I have to take time off client work to work on new personal work. Like it's an investment, right? It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the business, part of running a business. So I guess whatever mental gymnastics you have to do, but I think that's really the only way. Because then, I don't know, I find it harder and harder to multitask. As in, just because the level at which I want to do client work and personal work, like it's not a thing I can just moonlight, anymore. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
have to focus it all at that time. We all, and sometimes I'll have easy paid work, but I hate doing just the easy paid work. Like
right.
I both want to like, fulfilling client work and fulfilling personal work. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm just like it's got to be one or the other. I can't just pack it all in one day. I'm not 20 years old
yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah. Do you find the I've always kind of a mental block of like obviously there's the beginning when you freelance where it's like the immediate imposter syndrome of like starting
mhm.
any gig even though you just maybe finished a gig that you started that way and it totally ended fine, and then you start the next one and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, or these people. I think a lot of it also is starting new places with new people and you can't read anyone and you're like, am I, like, I've ended multiple days and gone to my partner, but I'm like, pretty sure they don't like me, and then I'm doing bad, and they're just like, no, it's probably fine. Just like a month ago when this was the same exact conversation we had. Um, so I think that that part of, yeah, the psychological is something that like doesn't get talked about a lot of the time. It's always the technical of like, email these people, have this part of your resume network here, but there is, yeah, a big psychological part of it that
Yeah,
is kind of just glossed over because I don't know, not many people
I
talk about it.
totally. I mean, I identify with that totally. I mean, it's always a joke at Box for, like it's always like, oh, first day, it's always like the first 2 days of a project, you're just like working all day, just cramming, be like, I gotta show them I can do stuff. Like,
Yeah.
they already hired you. Like, they know, they've seen your reel, your portfolio. They know like
hmm
20 other people that have hired you. Like, they know you're not blowing it, but you're like, oh my God, I gotta get something. I gotta get something posted on Slack. Like, geez.
I
But
think also,
yeah,
yeah, the
it's
remote
totally
part
like,
is hard, like out of sight. Like I could be doing nothing and they have no idea. Whereas in studio, it was always like at least you were there and people could see your screen and be like,
Mm,
I think they're working. And if they don't show up with anything, then I guess they just are bad. Whereas remote, it, yeah, if you don't post something under the day, did you work? Like they don't even know. And I always have that fear, which I'm sure no one's really thinking on the other end.
no,
um,
like they're too busy. They're too busy
right.
to worry
Yeah.
about that.
They're doing
You
other
know,
stuff and they just want the stuff to get done when it needs
right?
to get done.
They're
Um,
running like 10 projects. I don't know.
yeah.
Sometimes
Always find that
it's
funny that
interesting.
once people talk about it to each other, it's like, oh yeah, we're all having the same thoughts across all of the
Totally.
things. It's very
Um,
common.
yeah, but yeah, you just want to, we all have too good of work ethic. We want to just like be amazing.
And
So
then
yeah, we all need to chill out a little bit.
that
That's for
is,
sure.
yeah. And then so you kind of, I like to ask this for a lot of people of like, what is your like Everest brand or
Oh yeah.
project? Which you said title is kind of like where you want to go with stuff. Is that like what is like the dream title for? Like, is there a show you would want to do it for
Right.
that's like current, or is it just kind of titles in general?
Well, I mean, I would love if I could do something for Star Trek, for like
Ooh.
a Star Trek movie, Star Trek show. I would absolutely do main titles or main on ends, or even like in show like UI
Mm.
animations or like bridge UI or whatever. I'm obsessed with Star Trek, and like the past 5 years or so, I rewatched like everything. Um,
Oh wow.
you know,
That is
starting
a
from
that is a
original
trek, pun
TNG,
intended. Yeah.
yeah, DS9, and Voyager. But then like all the new shows now are amazing, and Lower Decks, the animated show that like Titmouse animates,
Mm.
it's hilarious. There's so many references to the old shows,
Mm.
and then like even some of the new ones, and like the characters. It's like more comedy, but I love how it's making fun of all like the absurd stuff in Star
Right.
Trek, but it still fits within the canon. Like
Mm.
the world building is fantastic. So anyway, I love Star Trek. Yes, I love the title sequence for the new Strange New Worlds. It's like the latest edition of like the original Enterprise, but rendered really beautifully, and that they're doing a good job of mixing the like, oh, this is supposed to be a prequel. This is like older technology, but
Okay.
it's cool. It's cool what they're doing with it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be my
Well,
dream project.
there's
One day Star
Picard,
Trek.
right? That's
Yeah, and
that
then
was part of the
Picard.
newer. Yeah. So it seems like the possibility of working on a Star Trek thing has like gone from like they kind of petered off with
Hmm.
the rebooted or newer ones, and now it's like spiking up. I think a lot of stuff seems to be doing that, where it's like your chances of a Star Wars film to work on was like kind of just going away. Now it's like very
Yeah,
high. A lot of that sort of stuff. So yeah,
I mean,
ooh,
Star Wars is cool too. I just like Star
yeah,
Trek more.
yeah,
That's my thing.
different vibes.
If
I
you're
think
listening, Paramount Plus. If you're listening,
to work on a
please.
Star Wars title is kind of already set in stone, pretty much what it's going to
Mhm,
look like for a lot of
mhm,
it. But yeah, Star Trek.
mhm.
I think the UI is always fascinating because a lot of
Love it.
MoGraph people like you get it, like you get the screen, but then like the screen in context is like just a whole nother world. Like the UX part of it of like someone like it has to have a purpose. Like you can move stuff in MoGraph and it doesn't really matter. Like it's like, either you're
Yeah.
obeying physics or you're obeying like what it has to serve in the story. But like the UX part of it is always something that I find really interesting because you're kind of, I like more rules. Like the more rules you apply to like how you have to work in kind of makes it easier in a way to like
Yeah.
work around stuff. So I think that part of the UX. Have you done any other UX outside of like film, but like for other things like
Um, I've done a
automotive?
yeah, I did a decent amount. Like I worked a lot on the Ford Mach-E UX stuff,
Mm,
UI, and then some GM like cars that I don't think they're even. Oh well, yeah, I did. I worked during with several different agencies during like the development stages of a few EVs. Both in like showing like feedback on the HUD or whatever, and inputs like inputs through the touch screen. So yeah, I've definitely like got some UI UX experience. I just don't have like cool sci-fi UI.
yeah.
I mean, I do it for my own fun, just on
Mm,
projects, but like I haven't been able to put it into a show. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely like I love the thought behind it because like for instance, like Picard, they have it's like that's the show that's probably the most in the future right now, and they have like holographic controls, like they're moving the ship with a thing like in the air, and
mm,
like it's absurd. It's like Minority Report fake, but
Right.
like it's like they thought about it though. It's not just completely willy-nilly, it's not
Hmm.
just magic. Like there's something going on there. And
Yeah.
then, obviously Star Trek has blundered it because like there was a one of the Next Generation movies where Riker had like a joystick, which looked really stupid. Like, but yeah, most of the time, they're putting in coordinates, whatever. But yeah, I do. I love the thought behind that, and like I have enough technical know-how that I would think about that.
Something.
Anyway, that's stuff's interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah. The part of the
Man.
instrument cluster stuff of automotive, the other layer was like the legal.
Mhm.
Like I didn't even know that was a thing of like there
Cool.
are laws around that stuff. And the first time I did it, I was like, oh wow, like this is
So
very
annoying.
hindering. Like type size font, and you're like, I just can't fit this all on the screen, but it all has to be
Yeah.
there. And you're like, man,
Ugh.
this is hard from the pitch frame up
Yeah.
until like what it's got to be for.
And if you're trying to animate stuff, like, it can't be distracting. It's got to be
Hmm.
within like so many milliseconds. Like, well, what are we even like? Do people even want this animation?
Yeah,
Like, why are we even animating this? Like, do people get in their cars? They don't care about animation.
right.
I
You
mean,
pretty
sometimes
much
you
just
do,
look
like
at
a minute.
speedometer,
Yeah,
things that are going to go wrong, fan speed,
I
like
know.
volume. Those are the few ones that
I
anyone cares
know.
about. And then they immediately notice it if it's not how they want it. Like all the stuff that goes right is like invisible, kind of like
Yes.
VFX.
Yes.
Anything that's like slightly wrong, it's like, ah, I
That's
hate
all you
this.
notice. Yeah.
Yeah, which
So
is
it's
the
a very thankless job, but I
yeah.
mean, yeah. So trying to solve like those problems within an actual, real vehicle is cool. In a sense, like, oh, this is an interesting problem, but yeah, it feels very restrictive very quickly. So, like, I like to do that, but I like to do it for just some. I mean, I want to do some stuff for entertainment. I'm sure there'll be its own drawbacks if I doing that, but I still want to do. I want to make some stuff for things people are choosing to watch,
Hmm.
like not advertisements. I want to do stuff for like,
Not stuff
shows
forced
shows
upon
that
them.
people
Yeah.
yeah people that people watch shows and they might skip the opening titles, but they might at least watch it once. They're
Mm.
choosing. They're like, oh, I'm choosing to watch a show for fun.
Hmm.
I'd love to like make stuff people watch when they're in a mood to like watch something. So
Right.
I guess that's my stuff. I don't really want to do like too much like visual effects. I definitely like. I know that realm has got its own
Yeah,
issues, but
making the UI kind of then
titles would be
falls
cool.
into
Titles are yeah. So
making it in
maybe
the scene too. Yeah.
so I don't know, like, but I don't know how that what goes, but I'm open to that. But I'm definitely like probably more interested in like titles. So.
And in personal projects, you had something maybe to
Oh
tease.
yeah,
That's
I'm in that vein of like trying to work on personal projects that are kind of title like, right? I have this little thing. I guess maybe I can share it and then kind of like talk while it's going. I'll just show a
yeah.
little part of it. So let me see if this is gonna work. All right. So this should be a video player. I'm gonna play it. So this I'm gonna talk over it. I've been making I do some electronic music and I made a song and I'm like, okay, I want to make like a music video of this song, right? I'm sure it's playing choppy in the stream, but you get the gist
Mm.
of it.
Yeah.
See the design. There's like the type. So that's like the name of it, Synchrony. Um, so it's kind of like I'm always trying to figure out how to make personal projects that are like fun. So I thought, well, maybe if I focus on this being more of like rather than a narrative, like a VJ visualizer type thing.
Mm.
So I kind of like it's based off of like one main render mostly, and you can see I'm like cutting between doing some UI and some camera stuff and whatever.
Hmm.
So this is kind of the evolution of like how to make a personal project without it being too overwhelming, but doing the things I'd like to do.
Right.
Doing things that feel like titles and whatever. So that's what this is going to be, and this is just a little sneak peek of it. But you can see I'm doing like some glitchy stuff that goes with the
Hmm.
beat and everything too. So yeah, it's kind of a thing I want to do because I want to make more music and I want to like use that music as a like a catalyst to do some visuals, So and there's a little type in there, right?
So
So that's
you
fun.
made the
So I'm just
music for this piece as well.
yeah, I made the music
Ooh.
and all the visuals and it. Hopefully, I'll have it out in like I don't know, a couple weeks. Like I'm so close. I've been so close forever. But yeah, stay tuned, everyone.
I feel like
um,
doing a piece to music kind of already gets you like a couple steps forward because it like
mhm.
um
I love it. It's such
it
a nice
inspires
vibe.
what the thing should be doing or like what the feel should be or even how to edit it to the
Yeah,
beat and stuff. So I feel like that's always like a little hack for some personal stuff is just get a song or something you like or make a song. So what did you do a lot of like making music in like personal
Um,
time?
not as much as I want to, but yeah, I do it. You know, to an extent. Like, let's see if I can show my like synth. Oh, this is a horrible shot. But there's like some of my
Ooh,
synth stuff down there,
it's
right next
heavy
to me.
duty.
Yeah. I mean, I do love synthesizers. I took like piano lessons when I was younger. I've learned a little bit of the Chinese violin, the erhu.
Hmm.
Like I've had music lessons here and there. So I'm not like a fluent player of any sort, but I know a little bit of music theory. I know some scales, and then I just love how synthesizers work. And I'm hooked on actual physical
Mm.
analog devices because turning knobs and stuff, it's like, wow, I'm away from the keyboard. I'm away
Mm-hmm.
from yeah, I pipe it through software to like finish the song, but like I can control the sound from this completely different interface. It's like such a nice, refreshing
It's
thing
the
to
like
do.
antithesis of keyframes. It's just like in the
Hmm.
moment and
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
so I love it, and it's very gestural and just more fun. So trying to work on that. We'll see. I hope to do like every January there's like Jamuary, right? People think
Mm.
so. I'm like, maybe I'll do January, and hopefully I can do little jams each day. I'm trying. I'm like, want to get into a little rhythm of it. So
Awesome.
just more bullshit.
More
Just
stuff to
this
do
stuff.
on top of
Yeah,
the other stuff to
I
do.
know. It's like, I mean, I'm obviously I like doing this stuff. I'm excited, but like I'm like I don't relax because it's like I both want to do it and sometimes it's like, oh, I'm doing too much. Scatterbrain, whatever. So
Awesome.
and here I am
Well,
talking on a stream. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for taking time out of your
Yeah,
weekend, the time you
you're
should be
welcome.
relaxing, to do
Yeah, but
this.
this is fun. I love it. Thanks.
And thanks everyone for coming to the stream and seeing this. This will also be up on YouTube if anyone jumped in a little bit late and wants to get the rest of it. But yeah, thank you, Julie, for being on stream, and have a great rest of your Saturday, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks for
Cool.
watching.
See ya.